So, what did you miss at Jubilee today? Well, you missed some more meditation practices for Lent, as Leanne took us through some Lectio Divina, and we experienced the 23rd Psalm in a new way. You also missed the choir singing part of Fore's Requiem, and Marie singing the Pie Jesu by Fore, and it was soul restoring. It was magnificent. And you missed the story from John's Gospel of the blind beggar that Jesus heals when he spits in the dirt, rubs the saliva into a mud, puts it in the young man's eyes, and brings back his vision. And of course, the temple folk, people of the synagogue, were upset because this had happened on the Sabbath. It wasn't according to the rules. Neighbors were confused and upset, not sure whether this was the young man they knew as a blind man, or wondering if they'd been fooled. Even the young man's parents didn't want to get involved in the controversy. But this young man refused to budge. He had been healed. He didn't know how. He didn't know what that made Jesus. He suspected perhaps a prophet, certainly a man from God, because he was blind and now he could see. And he wasn't changing that story. Well, we heard that story, and then I tossed my sermon out because I was afraid that perhaps we would miss some of the important aspects of the story. I thought perhaps I might be perpetuating a lie if I preached this man as blind, because in fact, I don't think this man was blind at all. I think he is the one man, well, he and Jesus, who was not blind. It's the others who are blind. In fact, although his eyes did not work, I believe that's true, he was more prepared to embrace the light, more prepared to embrace the world as it is, more prepared to work toward a better world than anybody else in the story. Everybody else in the story needs to stick to the rules, keep things the way they've always been, and do not want to recognize the miracles, don't want to recognize God's presence, don't want to recognize the challenges. I spoke a little bit about my own blindness, and how from time to time Jesus seems to show up, spit into the ground, rub that mud into my eyes. In a sense, Jesus confronts me, challenges me. And that challenge sometimes acts like the light does, I think, for a blind man. It changes all my frames of reference. I've been told reliably that someone without sight, upon having their sight restored, the response is not usually a Disney moment of song and dance, but in fact they fall over and vomit. Their balance is shot. All of their reference points are gone. And sometimes I think when Jesus confronts us, when our faith confronts us, when God confronts us, we are invited to seeing the world a whole new way, and it can be disorienting. And sometimes we want to run back into the shadows and stay blind. The young man in the story did not run back into the shadows. He stood up and said, I'm not sure what he did, but somehow Jesus has changed the world for me. And he decided he would live in that world. Well, I think that faith changes the world for all of us, but we don't always choose to live as if faith has changed the world for us. If we did, we wouldn't be so blind. If we did, we would recognize that those around us, those who disappoint us, those who frustrate us, those who anger us, those who are different from us, in fact, also reveal God's light, are every bit as precious and holy as we ourselves, even though their way of thinking might be different, even though their faith may be different. I think the more our eyes are opened, the more we recognize that we are not all that different. That's what you missed at Jubilee this morning. You missed that invitation to open your eyes and see the light, to recognize that being blind has very little to do with how your eyes work. It has a lot to do with the light that is offered to us by Jesus, by God, and whether we choose to live into that light or continue to hide in our blindness, hide in the shadows. I hope we don't miss you next week. It will be really good to see you. God bless.